Snow was falling slowly from the dark sky, covering the small town in white. The streetlights gave a soft yellow glow, but the wind was sharp and cruel in that freezing night. A young girl named Lena walked down the empty road, holding her thin coat tightly around her. Her shoes were soaked, her fingers numb. She had nowhere to go, no place to sleep, and her stomach had been empty since morning. She stopped in front of a tall building, the town's school hall. The lights inside were still on, and she could see a man cleaning the floor through the glass doors. For a moment she stood there, unsure if she should go in. Her breath came out in white clouds, and her body trembled from the cold, but she couldn't stay outside any longer. She took a deep breath and knocked gently on the glass. The janitor, an older man with gray hair and a kind face, looked up. He frowned when he saw her, a small girl, face red from the cold, coat torn at the sleeve. He walked to the door and opened it halfway. "What are you doing here, little one?" he asked, his voice both curious and cautious. Lena looked down, afraid to meet his eyes. I'm just cold," she whispered. "Can I please stay here for a little while?" "Just to warm up." The man hesitated. He knew the rules. No one was supposed to be in the hall after hours. But he also saw how pale she looked, how her lips trembled when she spoke. He sighed and said, "All right, come in, but just for a bit." Lena nodded quickly. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, stepping inside. The warmth hit her face like a soft blanket, and she closed her eyes for a second. Feeling a little safer, the hall was huge and silent. The sound of the janitor's mop echoed through the space, and the smell of cleaning soap filled the air. Lena sat down quietly on a wooden bench at the back. Hugging her knees close, her eyes wandered around the hall. There were posters of school events, rows of empty chairs, and on the stage stood a beautiful grand piano. Black and shining under the lights, Lena couldn't take her eyes off it. She had seen that piano before, every day after school. When she passed by the hall windows, she would stop for a few seconds, press her hand against the glass, and imagine playing it. Her mother used to play the piano too, not as big and fancy as this one, but an old one they had at home before things went wrong, before her mother got sick and before everything changed. Now that old piano was gone, sold to pay rent, and her mother was gone too. The memories hurt, but she couldn't stop thinking about them. She looked down at her frozen fingers and whispered, "It's been so long." The janitor noticed her staring at the piano. "You play?" he asked kindly. Lena looked up quickly, startled. "I used to," she said. "My mom taught me." The man smiled sadly. "That's a fine piano up there," he said. "Maybe someday you'll play again." Lena smiled faintly but said nothing. She thought the same thing every night when she passed the hall window. Maybe someday. The janitor went back to his work, and for a while, there was only the soft swish of the mop and the quiet hum of the heaters. Lena rubbed her hands together, trying to bring back feeling in her fingers. She listened to the echo of her heartbeat in the silent hall. Outside, the snow kept falling, turning the streets white and quiet. Inside, Lena felt a strange pull toward the piano. It was like something inside her was calling out. A small voice telling her to go near it, to touch the keys again, but she stayed seated. Afraid to break the silence or upset the kind man who let her in, she whispered to herself, "Just a few minutes more. Then I'll go." As time passed, her eyelids grew heavy. The warmth and the safety of the hall made her feel sleepy, but the thought of the piano wouldn't leave her. It was the only beautiful thing left in her world, the only thing that still connected her to her mother. Then suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the door the janitor had left slightly open. The sound startled Lena, and she looked again at the piano. Her heart started to beat faster. She didn't know it yet, but this night, this cold, forgotten night, was going to change her life forever. The janitor swept the floor, humming softly, and glanced at the girl again. She was staring at the stage, her face calm but her eyes full of something deep, something he couldn't explain. He didn't know that in just a few minutes, that small freezing girl would do something that would make everyone remember her name. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, the hall stayed quiet, waiting. The world outside was frozen and silent. But inside, something warm was about to begin. A spark of music, a memory of love, and a story that would touch every heart that heard it. The big hall was almost empty. Only the sound of the mop sliding across the floor filled the air. The old janitor hummed a tune as he worked, and his voice echoed off the high walls. The lights from above made the grand piano shine like a jewel, resting silently in the middle of the stage. Lena sat on the back bench, her small body curled up, her eyes fixed on that piano like it was something magical. Her fingers itched to touch the keys again. It had been so long since she last played. She remembered her mother's hands guiding hers, teaching her to play small songs, her mother's laugh when she hit the wrong note, and the way the sound used to fill their little house with warmth. But those days were gone, the house was gone. The laughter was gone too. The janitor looked at her again. "You all right there, kid?" he asked gently. Lena nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll leave soon." He smiled. "Take your time. Just don't make trouble, all right?" She smiled shyly. "I won't." Then he went back to his work, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The silence in the hall was strange. It was peaceful but also full of memories. Every sound echoed. The creak of the benches, the drip of a leaky pipe, even her heartbeat felt loud. Lena could see her breath in the air, little clouds that disappeared too fast. She rubbed her cold hands together, watching the piano like it might disappear if she blinked too long. Finally, she stood up. She walked slowly down the aisle toward the stage. Her steps echoed in the huge space. She hesitated at the bottom of the stage stairs. Looking back at the janitor, he wasn't watching. He was mopping near the entrance, humming to himself. Her heart raced as she climbed the few steps up. The piano looked even bigger up close. Its surface reflected her face, pale and tired, but curious. She ran her fingers lightly over the smooth black wood, feeling the coldness of it under her skin. She whispered, "Just one song, like a promise." Then she lifted the cover and sat down. The seat felt too soft for someone like her, who had been sleeping on hard benches and cold steps. But when her fingers touched the keys, something changed inside her. The first note came out weak and shaky, but then the sound spread through the hall. It was pure, gentle, and lonely. Like a cry wrapped in snow, she started playing slowly, her fingers remembering paths they hadn't walked in years. The music that came out wasn't perfect. Some notes cracked. Some wavered, but it had something real in it, something alive. Each key she pressed brought back a piece of her mother's face, her laugh, her warmth. The sound filled the empty hall, wrapping her in memories and comfort. It was as if every note was telling a part of her story. The hunger, the loss, the cold, and the love that still refused to die. The janitor stopped sweeping. He turned around, eyes wide. He hadn't expected to hear music, especially not from that child. He leaned on his mop, listening in silence. The sound was haunting, soft at first but growing stronger. It echoed through the big space, rising and falling like wind. Lena closed her eyes, lost in the song for a few minutes. She wasn't the girl with torn shoes and cold hands. She was the girl sitting next to her mother again, learning how to feel joy through sound. She played faster now, tears rolling down her cheeks. But she didn't stop. The piano keys were alive under her fingers, warm now instead of cold. She didn't notice that someone else had entered the hall. The side door opened quietly, letting in a tall man in a long coat. He froze when he heard the music. The notes hung in the air like snowflakes, and his face softened. He was the school director, Mr. Raymond, who had come back to collect some papers he forgot in his office. But now he forgot all about the papers. His eyes were fixed on the stage, where a thin little girl played as if her soul was spilling out through the piano. There was something in the way she touched the keys. Not technique, but truth. He had heard many students play before, but never like this. Never with this kind of pain and beauty. The janitor noticed the director and stepped back quietly. Afraid to interrupt, the hall felt sacred, like something rare was happening. The only sound was the piano, rising, trembling, glowing. When the last note faded, Lena stayed still, her hands resting on the keys. Her eyes were wet, but she smiled faintly. Then she looked up and froze. Mr. Raymond was standing at the back, watching her silently, his expression unreadable. Lena jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to warm my hands." But the director didn't speak right away. He walked slowly toward the stage, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Lena felt her throat tighten. She thought he would yell or tell her to leave. But instead he said softly, "Where did you learn to play like that?" She swallowed hard. "My mother taught me before she died," she whispered. Her voice broke on the last word. The hall fell silent again. But this time it wasn't cold silence, it was something warmer, deeper. The janitor looked at the two of them. The poor freezing girl and the director who suddenly looked like he'd seen something special. He knew then that something had changed in that moment. Something that might just change Lena's life forever. The air inside the hall felt heavier after the last note faded. The piano keys still quivered softly from the touch of Lena's trembling fingers. She stood there frozen in place, afraid to move. The grand space that had once seemed empty now held something alive. A secret shared between her and the sound. Mr. Raymond, the director, stood near the stage steps. His eyes didn't show anger, only something Lena couldn't name. Curiosity mixed with surprise. He had expected to find an intruder or a prank, not a freezing girl playing the piano like her soul was spilling out. The janitor had stopped cleaning completely, watching quietly from the corner, afraid to even breathe. "Play that again," the director said suddenly. His voice was calm but carried weight. Lena blinked, not sure she had heard him right. "So, sir?" she whispered. "Play again," he said, walking closer. "I want to hear it one more time." Her heart pounded. I can't, sir, I'm sorry. I shouldn't even be here." But the director shook his head slowly. "You should be," he said quietly. "Please sit, play." She hesitated, then looked at the janitor, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. So she sat back down, her fingers shaking slightly, and pressed the first key again. The soft sound floated through the hall, and soon the melody returned, and fuller this time. Warmer, braver, Mr. Raymond closed his eyes as she played, letting the sound wash over him. He wasn't just hearing music. He was feeling it. Every emotion woven into those trembling notes. It wasn't the kind of piano playing that came from training or sheet music. It came from memory, pain, and love. Something pure and untouched. When the song ended a second time, there was silence again. Lena kept her hands on the keys, afraid to look up. Then the director said, "What's your name?" She looked up slowly. "Lena," she said softly. "Lena Carter." He nodded, repeating the name quietly as if memorizing it. "Lena Carter." Then he asked, "Do you go to school here?" She shook her head. "No, sir, I used to before things got bad." Mr. Raymond frowned slightly. "Bad?" he asked gently. Lena looked down, tracing her finger along the piano keys. "My mom got sick. She taught piano lessons. But when she couldn't work, we lost everything," she said. "After she passed away, I went to live with my aunt. But she doesn't have much. I stopped school last year. I help her clean houses sometimes." Her words came out in pieces, quiet but sharp. The director felt a sting in his chest as he listened. He could see the story written in her tired eyes and her thin hands. "Your mother taught piano?" he asked. "Yes," Lena said. "She said music keeps people warm when life gets cold." For a long moment, no one spoke. The janitor wiped his eyes secretly, pretending to clean a spot on the floor. The director looked at the girl again, this time not as a stranger, but as someone who reminded him of why he had chosen to work with children. "Lena," he said softly, "would you like to play again tomorrow?" Her head jerked up. "Tomorrow?" she repeated. He smiled. "Yes, tomorrow. And the next day if you want. I'll ask the music teacher to open the room for you." Her mouth opened in surprise. "But I don't go to this school anymore," she said quickly. He nodded. "That can be fixed," he said simply. "Talent like yours shouldn't be left outside in the cold." Lena's eyes filled with tears again, not from sadness this time, but from disbelief. "Are you sure, sir?" she whispered. "I don't have money for lessons or uniforms or anything." The director smiled faintly. "We'll take care of that. You just take care of your music." At that moment, the clock struck midnight. The sound echoed through the hall, and for the first time that night, Lena felt warmth deep inside her. Not from the heaters or the tea the janitor brought her, but from something else. Hope. The director walked back toward the door, his steps echoing softly. "Be here at 9 tomorrow," he said. "Don't be late." Then he left, his long coat brushing the floor, leaving Lena and the janitor standing in the silent hall. The janitor smiled. "Well, looks like you got yourself a second chance, kid," he said. Lena looked at the piano again, her heart racing. "I can't believe it," she whispered. He laughed. "Believe it, sometimes life gives you a key. All you have to do is play the right note." That night, when Lena stepped back into the cold, the snow still fell. But it didn't feel as harsh anymore. She walked with lighter steps, her hands tucked in her sleeves, a smile flickering on her face. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she had something to look forward to. The sound of the piano still echoed in her ears, soft and warm like her mother's voice saying, "Keep playing, my girl, keep playing." And as she disappeared down the snowy street, the lights of the school hall glowed behind her. A new melody had begun that night, one that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The next morning came wrapped in fog and frost. The streets were still white from last night's snow, and every breath made a cloud in the air. Lena woke before sunrise. She hadn't slept much. Excitement had kept her awake. Her aunt was already gone to work, leaving behind a note that simply said, "Be careful and don't get in trouble again." Lena smiled faintly. She put on her only warm sweater, the one that was 2 sizes too big, and ran to the school. The roads were quiet. Only the sound of her boots crunching through snow followed her. The closer she got, the more her heart pounded. Was the director serious? Would he really let her play again? When she reached the school gate, she stopped for a moment. The huge building looked different in daylight, less cold, more welcoming. She took a deep breath and walked inside. Her fingers were numb, but her chest was warm with hope. In the hallway, the janitor was already sweeping. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Right on time, kid," he said. "He's waiting inside." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She followed him down the echoing hall, each step making her nervous. The door to the music room was slightly open. She peeked inside and saw Mr. Raymond talking to a woman, the music teacher, Mrs. Holloway. She was tall, graceful, and had silver hair tied neatly behind her head. Lena froze at the doorway, feeling small and unsure. The director turned and smiled. "Ah, there she is," he said. "Lena, come in." She stepped in carefully, her eyes darting around the beautiful room. Shelves of sheet music, instruments shining in sunlight, and in the center another grand piano, even more polished than the one in the hall. "This is Mrs. Holloway," Mr. Raymond said. "She teaches piano here, and she's agreed to listen to you play." Lena's mouth went dry. "Listen to me?" she repeated softly. The teacher smiled kindly. "Don't worry, dear, just play whatever you love." Lena sat at the piano. Her hands trembling slightly, she took a deep breath, remembering her mother's words. Music doesn't need perfection, only truth. She closed her eyes and began to play the same song from last night. The melody floated softly at first, then grew stronger. Her fingers moved with more confidence now. Guided by feeling instead of fear, Mrs. Holloway stopped breathing for a moment, watching the girl's hands dance across the keys. There was no hesitation, no confusion, only pure emotion. The director glanced at her and she nodded slowly. Her eyes shimmered with tears when the song ended. Lena sat silently, her head lowered. She thought she had made mistakes, maybe too many. But when she looked up, both adults were staring at her with wonder. "That," Mrs. Holloway whispered, "wasn't a performance. That was a story." Mr. Raymond smiled. "I told you, didn't I?" he said. "She has something rare." Lena blinked in surprise. "Was it okay?" she asked nervously. The teacher laughed gently. "It was more than okay, child," she said. "You play from the heart, and that's something you can't teach." The director stepped forward. "Lena, I'd like you to start coming here every day," he said. "We'll arrange lessons, meals, and anything you need." Her mouth opened in shock. "Really? But I can't pay," she said. He raised a hand. "You don't need to." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." The director smiled warmly. "Just promise me one thing, never stop playing." Over the next few weeks, the music room became Lena's second home. Every morning she arrived early, practiced until her fingers hurt, and stayed until the janitor reminded her it was time to go. Mrs. Holloway guided her gently, teaching her scales, posture, and reading notes, but she never changed Lena's natural way of playing, the emotional honesty that made her special. Sometimes after class, other students would peek inside, curious about the quiet girl who played so beautifully. Some whispered that she was a prodigy. Others didn't believe it, but when they heard her play, even the noisiest ones went silent one afternoon. As the winter sun set behind the windows, Mr. Raymond came in with an announcement. "The annual winter recital is coming soon," he said. "Mrs. Holloway and I think you should perform." Lena's heart almost stopped. "Me? In front of everyone?" She gasped. I can't. The teacher smiled. You can, she said softly. You already did, remember? That night when no one was watching, you filled the whole hall with music. Lena thought about it, that cold night. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the warmth that grew inside her. She looked at the piano again and nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll try, the director smiled proudly. Good, he said. Let the world hear your story. That evening, when Lena walked home, snowflakes were falling again. But she didn't feel cold this time. She walked with a new rhythm in her steps, the rhythm of her music, the rhythm of hope.
She didn't know that her life was about to change again.
That her small performance at the winter recital would not only move the audience, but reveal something far greater about her mother, her past, and the man who had once just been the director of the school. The night of the recital came faster than Lena expected. The school hall was glowing with golden lights, the same hall where she had once sat shivering in the dark. Now it was filled with people, parents, students, teachers, and even the mayor. The air buzzed with excitement, everyone dressed in fine clothes and whispering about the performances to come. Backstage, Lena sat quietly on a wooden chair, her small hands clutching the hem of her simple blue dress. She didn't have fancy ribbons or jewelry like the others, but Mrs. Holloway had brushed her hair neatly and told her she looked beautiful. You have something better than gold, the teacher had said. You have music inside you. Still, Lena's heart pounded. She peeked through the curtain and saw the grand piano standing under the lights, waiting for her. Her throat went dry. Her name was on the program. Lena Carter. Special performance, and she couldn't believe it. Hey, a voice whispered beside her. It was the janitor who had come to wish her luck. He smiled and handed her a small handkerchief. For your sweaty palms, he said with a wink. Lena laughed nervously. What if I mess up? She whispered. The man shrugged. Then you keep playing, kid. Nobody remembers the mistake if you finish with heart. The director, Mr. Raymond, appeared next. His usual serious face softened with pride. You'll do great, he said. Just remember who you're playing for. Lena nodded. She knew exactly who, her mother. When her turn came, she felt her knees tremble. The announcer called her name and the crowd fell silent. The bright lights hit her face as she walked onto the stage. For a second, she wanted to run back. But then she saw the piano, the same one she had touched months ago, cold and beautiful. And suddenly she felt calm. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. The lights above made her eyes sparkle. The audience waited, whispers fading into stillness. And then she began. The first note rang out soft as a snowflake, followed by another and another. The melody grew, gentle, sad, but filled with warmth. It was a piece she had written herself, one that told her story. The lonely nights, the cold streets, her mother's voice, and the hope she found again. The hall became silent except for her music. Every note seemed to tell a secret. The janitor leaned against the wall, wiping his eyes. Mrs. Holloway clasped her hands tightly. And even the director, standing near the exit, felt a lump in his throat. Lena played with her whole heart, her face glowing, her fingers moving like they belonged to the piano. The music swelled and dipped, rising like the sound of wind over snow. And when she reached the final part, she slowed, whispering the last few notes like a goodbye kiss to the past. When the final sound faded, there was a heartbeat of silence, and then applause, thunderous applause that filled the entire hall. People stood up from their seats, clapping, cheering. Some had tears in their eyes. Others just stared in awe at the little girl who had turned silence into magic. Lena froze, then smiled shyly and stood. She bowed deeply, her eyes glistening in the front row. She noticed an old woman standing with her hand over her heart, her aunt. Tears streamed down the woman's face, pride and apology mixing together. But one person wasn't clapping, and Mr. Raymond instead. He was standing still, his eyes wet, watching her like he had just recognized something. His hands trembled slightly. Then slowly he joined the applause. But his expression was different, thoughtful, emotional, haunted. Later, after the show, the hall was nearly empty again. Lena stayed behind. Still glowing from all the praise, Mrs. Holloway hugged her tightly. You were brilliant, my dear, she said. The audience didn't just hear music, they felt it. The janitor patted her shoulder. Told you you'd do fine. Then Mr. Raymond walked up quietly. He looked at her for a long moment before saying, Lena, your song. He paused, struggling to find words. It sounded familiar. She blinked. Familiar? Yes, he said slowly. Very familiar. He pulled a small pendant from his pocket, a tiny silver locket shaped like a note. Your mother, he said, his voice low. Her name was Clara, wasn't it? Lena's eyes widened. How do you know that? The director smiled sadly. She taught me once, many years ago, before she became sick. I was one of her first students. Lena's mouth fell open. You knew my mom? She whispered. He nodded. She told me once that music would always bring people together. No matter how far apart they were, the girl covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She said the same thing to me, she whispered. The director placed the locket gently in her hand. She wanted me to give this to her best student, he said softly. I never thought it would be you. Lena clutched the locket tightly, feeling its warmth for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. The lights in the hall dimmed slowly, leaving only the soft glow of the piano. That night, as she walked home through the snow, the locket against her heart, Lena realized something. She hadn't just found her music. She had found the missing piece of her mother's story, and somehow, through the notes she played, they were together again. Snowflakes drifted softly against the windows as Lena sat at the piano the next morning. The hall was empty again, just like that first night. But everything felt different now. No more fear, no more hunger, only warmth. The kind that came from being seen, from being heard. The silver locket hung around her neck. Resting against her chest, she kept touching it, as if afraid it might disappear. Inside was a tiny picture. Her mother, smiling, holding a baby. Her, Lena couldn't stop staring at it. Every time she looked, it reminded her of the music, of everything she had lost and somehow found again. The door opened softly and Mr. Raymond stepped inside. He looked tired but peaceful. You're early, he said. Lena smiled shyly. Couldn't sleep, she replied. I wanted to play. He nodded and sat down in the front row. Play then, he said. I could use a little morning magic, Lena laughed softly, placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The sound filled the hall, calm, light, hopeful. She wasn't playing sadness anymore. This song was different. It was full of light, like sunlight melting snow. As she played, Mr. Raymond watched her, and memories began to flood his mind. His first piano lessons, her mother's kind smile, her patient voice saying, Don't just play notes, feel them. He remembered how she had believed in him when no one else did. When the song ended, he clapped softly. Your mother would be proud, he said. Lena smiled. I hope so, she whispered. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Lena, he said, I've been thinking about something. There's a music scholarship offered every year, national level. The winner gets to study at the Royal Academy. Lena's eyes widened. Royal Academy? She repeated, but that's for real musicians, he chuckled. You are a real musician. You just don't know it yet. She blushed, shaking her head. I can't, sir. I wouldn't stand a chance. You said the same thing before your recital, he reminded her gently. And look what happened. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a form. Mrs. Holloway and I already talked. We want you to apply. Her eyes filled with shock and excitement. Me? She whispered. For a national contest? Yes, you, he said firmly. You have something special. Something no one can teach a heart. The world needs to hear it. Lena looked down at the paper. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. But what if I fail? She said softly. Mr. Raymond smiled. Then you'll fail beautifully, he said. But I don't think you will. That evening, Lena practiced for hours. She stayed after school, repeating scales, rewriting her song, learning new ones. Her fingers ached, but she didn't stop. Every note felt like a step toward something bigger. Mrs. Holloway guided her patiently, correcting her hand positions, teaching her new techniques. Sometimes they argued over tempo. Sometimes they laughed until their stomachs hurt. The janitor brought her snacks and tea, saying, Our little pianist needs fuel. Weeks passed, and the day of the scholarship audition arrived. The school arranged a small send-off for her. The students cheered, even those who once doubted her. Mrs. Holloway hugged her tightly. Play the truth, she whispered. That's all you need. At the train station, Mr. Raymond handed her a small envelope. Open it when you need courage, he said. Lena smiled and nodded, then boarded the train. watching the snowy town fade behind her. The city was huge, noisy, and bright. The Royal Academy's grand hall made her school look tiny. She felt small again, her nerves twisting inside her. In the waiting room, dozens of students sat with polished shoes, expensive coats, and thick folders of sheet music. Lena sat in her simple dress, clutching her locket. She could hear the others practicing, their fingers flying perfectly over the keys. Her hands started to shake. She thought of leaving, of running back home. Then she remembered the envelope. She opened it and found a small card inside with 4 words written in neat handwriting. "Your mother taught me." Her heart melted. She smiled through her nerves, sat up straight, and whispered, "Okay, Mom." One more time. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage. The judges looked serious, their pens ready. She sat at the piano and took a deep breath. The first note came out soft, fragile, but honest. Then came another, and another. The melody she played wasn't from any famous composer. It was her story, the cold night, the kindness of a janitor, the discovery of a director, the warmth of a mother's memory. By the time she finished, one of the judges had tears in her eyes. Another had stopped writing halfway through. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then the head judge said quietly, "Thank you, Miss Carter." Lena bowed, heart racing, and walked off the stage. She didn't know if she'd won, but for the first time it didn't matter. She had done what she came to do. She played her truth. Outside, as she looked up at the sky, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet. She smiled, whispering, "I did it, Mom." And the wind seemed to carry a faint melody back to her, the same tune her mother once played when the world felt too cold. The results were supposed to be posted at noon, but Lena arrived an hour early. Her stomach churned with nerves. She stood in the wide marble hallway of the Royal Academy, surrounded by other students and their proud parents. Everyone was talking, laughing, taking pictures, but Lena felt like the world was spinning too fast. She clutched her locket, her only comfort. Her fingers were red from the cold. Her mind replayed the performance again and again. Every note, every breath, what if I wasn't good enough? She whispered to herself. The memory of her mother's voice came back, soft and warm. If you played with love, you were good enough. The doors opened, and an official stepped out holding a list. The crowd went silent. He posted the sheet on the notice board, and in seconds people rushed forward. Lena stood frozen for a moment before taking a deep breath and walking slowly toward it. Dozens of names filled the page. She scanned them one by one, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Then there it was, halfway down the list. Lena Carter, accepted, full scholarship. Her knees almost gave out. She covered her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. "I did it," she whispered. "I really did it." A woman standing next to her looked over and smiled kindly. "Congratulations, dear." Lena could barely speak. "Thank you," she breathed, still trembling. She stepped outside the academy doors, the wind brushing against her cheeks. The city was alive with movement, cars honking, people hurrying. But to her, everything went quiet. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "Mom, I made it." That night, she called Mrs. Holloway and Mr. Raymond from a payphone at the station. "I got in," she shouted, her voice cracking with joy. On the other side, Mrs. Holloway cried with pride. "I knew you would," she said. Mr. Raymond laughed softly. "I never doubted you for a second, kid," the janitor, who had been standing nearby with a mop, asked. "She did it, didn't she?" Mr. Raymond nodded, smiling. She did, back in the city. Lena couldn't sleep that night. She sat by her window at the dorm the academy had given her. Watching snow fall under the streetlights, it was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made her chest ache. She opened the locket again, tracing her mother's picture with a fingertip. "I wish you could see this," she whispered. "You'd laugh and say I need to keep my back straight at the piano." She smiled through her tears, then began to hum the melody she had played at the audition. Softly, like a lullaby to the night, weeks turned into months, and Lena's name slowly began to spread through the academy. She wasn't just another student. She was the girl from the small town who played like the piano could breathe. Teachers admired her natural emotion, while other students whispered in awe or envy. But Lena didn't care about attention, she just wanted to learn. She practiced until her fingers hurt, stayed in the studio late at night, and sometimes cried quietly when the memories got too heavy. Every note she played was a conversation with her mother, a promise to never forget where she came from. One afternoon, as she was finishing her practice, the head of the academy, a tall man with silver glasses, entered the room. "Miss Carter?" he said. She stood quickly. "Yes, sir?" He smiled. "We're hosting a concert in Paris next month. We'd like you to perform one of your original pieces." Lena froze. "Paris?" She repeated. "Me?" "Yes, you," he said. "We believe your story and your music deserve to be heard by the world." When he left, she sat down hard on the piano bench, shaking her head in disbelief. "Paris," she whispered, laughing a little. "Mom, can you believe that?" The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Rehearsals, fittings, lessons, interviews. She had never worn a gown before, never been on an airplane. Never had anyone ask for her autograph. It all felt like a dream that could fade any second. On the night of the concert, as she stood backstage, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She wasn't the scared girl in a torn coat anymore. She was the pianist who had turned the coldest night of her life into music. The lights dimmed and she walked onto the stage. The grand piano waited for her, gleaming under soft lights. The audience was full, hundreds of people, cameras flashing. The moment she sat down, she felt her mother beside her again. As if invisible hands rested gently on her shoulders, she began to play. And the music that flowed was everything. Her journey, her pain, her joy, her gratitude. It was the story of a girl who had once been freezing and forgotten, but who found warmth in a melody. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. People stood to their feet. The sound thundered around her, and for the first time, she didn't cry, and she smiled, calm and steady. The girl who had once asked to stay in the hall had become the reason halls all over the world would fill with music. And somewhere deep in the quiet between her heartbeats, she heard her mother's voice again, soft as a whisper. "You kept playing, my girl." And the world finally listened years later. The same piano hall that had once been empty and cold was filled again. The walls gleamed with new paint. The chandeliers sparkled brighter than ever. And the seats were packed with people who had come from all over to see her. Lena Carter, the girl who once begged to stay warm in this very hall, had become one of the most beloved pianists in the world. She had played in grand theaters from London to Tokyo, won awards she never even dreamed of, and inspired thousands of young musicians to believe that music could come from pain, hope and truth. But tonight was different. Tonight was special. She had returned home, not as the freezing girl who once sat in the back row, but as the woman whose music had carried her across oceans and back again. Backstage, she stood quietly, her long gown shimmering under the soft lights. Her fingers brushed against the old silver locket she still wore every time she performed. Inside, her mother's picture had faded slightly, but the memory never did. The janitor, now retired but still sharp, sat in the front row beside Mrs. Holloway and Mr. Raymond. His hands trembled slightly as he held a small bouquet of flowers. "You believe this?" he whispered. "Our little girl filling the whole hall again." Mrs. Holloway smiled, eyes glistening. "She was always meant to, Mr. Raymond nodded, his voice soft. "She was the song this school needed." The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. Lena walked onto the stage. Her steps were graceful, confident, but her heart was pounding the same way it had all those years ago. She looked out into the crowd and smiled when she saw them. Her old teachers, her aunt, and so many familiar faces. Then she turned toward the piano, the same one she had once touched with shaking, frozen fingers. For a moment she just stood there, eyes closed, remembering that first night. The sound of the janitor's mop, the warmth of the lights, the fear of being caught, and the spark that changed everything. When she sat down, she didn't open any sheet music. This performance wasn't about notes. It was about memory, gratitude, and coming full circle. The first chord she played was soft, deep, and gentle. The sound rolled through the hall like a heartbeat. The melody built slowly, layer by layer, telling a story only she could tell. The crowd leaned forward, caught in her spell. She played the story of a young girl lost in winter, of the kindness that kept her warm, of a song born from sorrow that became light. Every note shimmered with emotion, forgiveness, love, and a quiet kind of joy as she played. The memories came alive, her mother's hands guiding hers, the janitor's quiet smile, the director's steady voice saying, "Play again," and Mrs. Holloway's words, "You have music inside you." She felt them all there, sitting with her, listening, proud. When the final note faded, there was silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that follows something sacred. The audience stayed still for a breath, then rose all at once, clapping, cheering, crying. Lena stood and bowed deeply, tears shining in her eyes. She looked toward the front row and saw Mr. Raymond stand up, clapping slowly with a proud smile. Mrs. Holloway wiped her eyes. The janitor waved his bouquet in the air, laughing through his tears after the concert. The crowd swarmed around her, but she made her way to the 3 people who had changed her life. She hugged them tightly. "I wouldn't be here without you," she whispered. Mr. Raymond smiled. "We just opened the door," he said. "You're the one who walked through it," Mrs. Holloway added softly. "Your mother would be so proud." "Lena," the janitor chuckled. "I told you. Kid, nobody remembers the mistakes if you finish with heart." Lena laughed, hugging them again. "I'll never forget that," she said before leaving. She returned to the stage one last time. The hall was empty now, just like that first night years ago. She sat at the piano again and played quietly, just for herself. The sound filled the stillness like a warm blanket. As she finished, she whispered, "This is where it all began." Her fingers lingered on the keys, and she smiled. The stage lights dimmed slowly, leaving only her silhouette against the piano. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady. The town looked almost the same. Quiet streets, glowing lamps, windows fogged with warmth. But inside that hall, something had changed forever. Every winter since then, Lena returned not as a performer but as a teacher. She opened her own foundation for children who couldn't afford lessons. She said music had saved her life, and now it was her turn to pass it on. And so every snowy evening when a small, nervous child asked if they could stay a little longer in the hall, she smiled gently and said, "Of course you can, but only if you promise to play." Then, as they sat at the same piano, the melody of hope began again, soft at first, then brighter. And in that moment, Lena knew the music would never stop. It would live on in every note, every child, and every heart that once knew the cold but found warmth through a song.